your world doing? I hope everyone is staying home and staying safe. Once again, I would like to thank all of you for supporting me until now, and this would not have been possible without all of your support and your wonderful comments of appreciation. I would like to thank all of you for being friendly towards me and supporting me towards me trying to share my knowledge throughout this quarantine. um, Again, chess is a very good way to productively spend your time, at the same time bond with your family members, because this is not only a fun game but it also has a lot of plus points. Like, it improves your memory power, it improves your decision making skills, and it also gives you this way to be able to look towards your consequences, because every move that you make will affect the rest of your game. So this teaches us that everything that you do will have a consequence. So first, I will recap over everything that I have shared in the past 4 classes. So now I'm going to say what we learned in the past 4 videos, and if you want to know any of these following concepts, you can just go and check the other videos out. The title will already have the concept that you would like to learn. So we learned how the different pieces move, what's the different values of the pieces. We learned how the starting position of the game is. We learned that there are 64 squares and how they are mainly divided into 2 sides. We learned the main 4 ABCs of chess, that is attack or avoid, block and capture. We learned that there are some special moves in the game of chess, that is castling and en passant. We also learned that in the endgame there's something called as the knight technique, which is used by the king and the queen to checkmate the opponent's king. Then we learned one more technique in the endgame, that is known as the ladder mate, with the king and 2 rooks against 1 king. And we also learned that how we're supposed to make the opponent's king vulnerable and how we can take advantage of the opponent's king being vulnerable. So before I start on the different ways how you can make your middle game better, there should always be a few guidelines that you should follow in the middle game so that you don't make any major mistake. The first very important thing is that you should always have a plan. Having a plan is better than without having a plan. Even if the plan is bad, it's always better to have a plan than not having a plan itself. Because when you have a plan, you know that there is one proper direction that all your pieces are following. You know that there is one way in which your brain is thinking. But if you don't have a plan at all your pieces will be uncoordinated and they would be scattered all over the place. One more thing is that always think before you move. Now, what are you supposed to think about? There should always be a few questions that you should ask yourself before you move, and after your opponent moves, what are you supposed to think about that move? When your opponent moves any piece, there's always some squares that the opponent is not guarding anymore. So you're supposed to see if you can take advantage of any of those squares that the opponent let down. Now, when the opponent plays anything, you should check why the opponent played that particular move, because obviously the opponent had some idea behind the move, right? So you should think about it. Can he capture any of your pieces? Can he take advantage of anything? Can he attack your king in some way? Can he attack any of your other pieces? Can he make your position worse? Those are the things that you should ask yourself when your opponent plays a move. Once you have seen what the opponent's ideas are, once you have seen what the opponent's threats are, you should see how you can defend against them. Now, if there is no immediate threat, what are you supposed to look for? You are supposed to look if you can capture any of your opponent's pieces, if you can take advantage of any of your opponent's weaknesses. When your opponent played that move, did he make a mistake? Did he leave some very important square behind? These are the things that you should think about before you play your own move. Now, when you play any move and if there is going to be a capture, right, you should always count your materials. So after that capture, who will be a better? Because in the past classes, I have shared the different values of the pieces, like of the queen, rook, the bishop, the knight, the pawns. You should always see that, oh, okay, after this capture, will I be having more pieces or will my opponent be having more pieces? If you see that even in one single variation, your opponent can have an advantage, do not play that move anymore, because you do not know what variation your opponent is going to play. And if your opponent thinks properly and does play the variation, you would be in a very bad position, right? Because now you have a losing material. One more thing that you should be very careful about is that if you're not leaving any of your other pieces hanging, so if suppose you're playing your knight or any of your pieces to a square advance, are you leaving any of your pieces behind? One more thing that you should be very important of is that always see that in the current situation, who is in a leading square. Like if your opponent is having an advantage, you should think how you can gain back the advantage. So the main idea is that don't give up. One more thing is that in the middle game is the point where there will be the winner or the loser will be decided, most probably, because the opening you are setting your foundation, and in the end game you're just finishing off the game. So the middle game is actually when you're supposed to think about what's going to happen, how you're supposed to play. So it's very important that you keep your control over the center or over your winning side. How do you know which is your winning side? We can find that out through your pawn structure. So that is one more thing you should be very careful about. Maintain a strong pawn structure, because if you have a strong pawn structure, your opponent will not easily be able to enter into your side and come and attack you. The sides are usually white and black side. It's mostly divided by the 4 different ranks. So the first 4 ranks are of white and the next 4 ranks are for black. So this is how we divide your side and the opponent's side. So you should always be careful that you are protecting your side with a proper pawn structure. Don't move the pawns in front of your king a lot of times. In fact, don't move it at all, because once you move it, you're giving your opponent a chance to come and attack you. Only move it if it is very necessary. I know that I have said that checks are a very important part of the game, because usually when you keep giving checks to your opponent, there is a chance that the opponent might get pressurized or you might be able to checkmate your opponent. But don't give useless checks, because if you keep giving useless checks, you might actually, give your opponent the time and the proper, the foundation to come and attack you in a very proper way. One more thing is that don't give, when you give these useless checks, it's also known as an intermediate attack. Intermediate attacks, the attacks that are given without actually having a proper plan to support it. So if you only have one piece to attack your opponent's king, don't go and attack with that one piece. Wait, bring 2-3 more pieces and support that one piece to attack your king, one opponent's king. And if you think that you are going to be able to attack your opponent's king successfully, always make sure that you have a minimum of 3 pieces attacking the opponent's king, and at least 2 more pieces are pointing in that direction, so that you would have the option. So if suppose you lose one piece, you will be able to bring one more piece in attack. So coming to my next point is that don't give uncoordinated attacks, and don't leave out your own squares, because as I said in the beginning, your opponent is always looking for threats. Your opponent is also looking for a plan. We have to always think of the opponent as a really strong player, so that you don't overestimate your opponent but don't underestimate your opponent at the same time. So think equal. If you think good moves for yourself, also think good moves for your opponent. So whenever you play a piece, don't miss a weakness that you made in your own side. One more thing is that always look out for double attacks, always look out for tactics, always look out for pins, and always bring your rooks to the open files. Now, how do open files help the rooks? As I said before, the rooks move in a straight path, right? So when there is an open file, there is a very high possibility that your rook will be able to penetrate into your opponent's side and actually be able to carry out a successful attack. Now that I have said all these points, there is one very important point that you should always keep in your brain, and that is never give up. Never, just let your game slip. Even if you lost your queen against nothing, if you don't have a compensation for anything, no one said that your opponent will not make a mistake anymore. You can still either stalemate or you might even end up winning the game. There have been many phenomenal chess players and also some players in the club level itself who have been able to flip over a completely losing game. So never give up, whatever happens. Now I mentioned that you should always look for pins, double attacks, forks. Now you might be asking what are these terms? I will be explaining them now in a very short time. So this position is an example of a pin, but whenever you get a position, first you're supposed to see the material. So here we can see that this is a perfectly equal game with 6 pawns on each side, 1 minor piece, 2 rooks, 1 queen on each side, and the kings seem pretty safe right now. But this is where the pin is here. White is pinning the black pawn to the king. So, how do we know that this is a pin? A pin takes place when one piece is pinned towards a higher valued piece. So here the rook is pinning the pawn to the king. The pawn cannot move because the king will be in check. So that's why this is where the pin has taken place. White is pinning black. So how can we take advantage of a pin? Usually, to take advantage of a pin, you add more pressure on the piece that is being pinned. But over here, we straight away notice that this bishop is only being guarded by the one pawn and the pawn is pinned. So in actually some ways, the bishop is not protected at all, except beside the king. So if we count the number of defenders on the bishop, that is 1. And if we count the number of attackers, it would be 1 and 2. This is actually made in one move by white. Can you guess how we can take advantage of this pin, but at the same time be able to checkmate the black's king in the next 2 moves? Yes, see, this is actually a very easy position. How is this so easy? Because this pawn cannot move anywhere. You notice straight away that this pawn can capture. If this king was supposed here, the pawn could straight away capture the queen and black would be winning this game very easily. But that is not possible. Why is that? Because the black pawn is being pinned by the rook to the king. So now the king cannot even capture the queen. Why is that? Because the pawn is protecting it. And now once the king moves backwards, queen takes f7 and this is a checkmate. Once again, I'll show how important the pin was in this position. Over here, we straight away notice that the black bishop is unprotected. Why is that? Because the one piece that is protecting it is pinned by the rook. The king is also protecting the bishop, but we straight away notice that there are 2 attackers and 1 defender. That is also one more thing that you should be very careful about whenever you're going to take a capture. You should count the number of attackers and defenders. So over here, the number of attackers is 1 and 2 and the number of defenders is just 1. So this, you take advantage of the pin by capturing the piece that is unprotected. And then once the black king is forced to go back, queen takes f7 and checkmate. This is how a pin usually works. So now another usually common tactic in the middle game is the knight fork. What is a knight fork? As we have learned previously, the knight is the only piece that can jump over and the only piece that has like an unusual type of movement. So here we can, knight fork is usually when it's a double attack. So what is a double attack? It's just like the name, you attack 2 pieces at the same time. So in the knight has a very more, wide range of attacking pieces. So we can clearly take advantage of that, and this is the position that is an example of a knight fork. White is going to fork the opponent, that is black. But when you first notice this position, we see that black is having a very high materialistic advantage, and that is that black has a queen against the knight. You are going to ask now, how will white win this position? But yes, that is the beauty of a knight fork. A knight fork can convert a totally losing game to a totally winning game. So here, white is going to knight fork the king and the queen. So whenever you want to fork, you first see, can the knight give check to the king? So yes, in this case, white can give check in two different ways. One is by capturing this pawn. We first away, that is knight on h6. We can straight away notice that this is a very bad move. Why is that? Because the pawn on g7 will capture and we just ruined that position, and therefore this was a very big blunder. But the other knight move, that is to knight on e7 on the other hand, is a totally winning move. Why is that? Because when you see, the knight is actually giving check to the king on g8, but at the same time attacking the queen on d5. You might be asking, why can't black move the queen? That is because the king is under a check. Whenever the king is under a check, you cannot move another piece, except if you are going to capture the knight. You have one more thing that is very important, is that you can never block a knight's check. Why is that? Because the knight is not giving check in any direct way. There is no way that you can bring in a piece and protect it. You have to either move the king or capture the knight. So there is no way that you can capture this knight, and therefore the only move that black has is to move the king. And now knight on d5 captures the queen, and now this is a winning position for white. So again, I'm going to show you how to do the fork, because this is a very important concept. It can either make you lose the game or either it can make you win the game. So throughout the whole game, you should always be careful for a knight fork. So again, whenever you feel like there is a knight fork in this occurring position, you see in the different ways you can give check, because usually the knight forks with the check are the most strongest knight forks. So here there are two checks, knight on h6 and knight on e7. Obviously knight on h6 is a blunder because g takes h6 and you are going to lose this game now. So now there's knight to e7 and king is forced to play to f8, f7, h8 or h7, but all of these moves will not make a difference to black position because knight takes d5 and now white is winning this game. So knight fork is another very important tactic that you should always be careful for if you can use it against your opponent or if your opponent can use it against you. So now we are going to learn one more very basic but important type of tactic, and that is the skewer attack. Actually, the skewer attack is just like the pin, but in an opposite way. In the pin, a lower value piece is being pinned to a higher value piece, but over here is going to be the opposite. A higher value piece will be skewered to a lower value piece. Here, if we count the materials, we straight away notice that white is an exchange down. That means that white has a minor piece while black has a major piece. How can we make this a winning game for white? We can make this a winning game by the attack of skewer. We straight away notice that the king and the rook are in the same rank, and so the king can be skewered to the rook. Again, so here the skewer move is queen to h8. Now it might make more sense to you because now once the king moves, the rook is going to be captured. So a higher value piece, that is the king, once it moves, a lower value piece, that is the rook, is going to be under an attack, and so white can capture it. So now actually black has two options to stop this check. That is by blocking or by avoiding. The blocking move is r to g8, and that is actually a very big blunder. Why is that? Because the rook is unprotected, and so queen takes g8 would actually mean that after king to e7, black is losing two rooks instead of just one. So here for black, the actual better move is to just move the king away, and after queen takes the rook on a8, actually white becomes a piece up. So from an exchange down, white became a piece up. I'll explain the concept of skewer once again because it is slightly different from the pin. In the pin, a lower value piece cannot move anymore because a higher value piece is under threat. But over here, a higher value piece, if it moves, then a lower value piece comes under threat. So here, queen to h8 is actually attacking a higher value piece, that is the king. But once the higher value piece moves, the lower value piece, that is the rook in this case, is coming under an attack. And so after queen takes a8, we have just made a totally losing game into a slightly winning game. This is how we can use this skewer in the middle game or in the end game. So before I end this lesson, I have actually gotten a few queries about the score sheet and the chess clock. So I'll be explaining each of them and then we'll be ending this lesson. So this is actually the official FIDE chess clock. FIDE is actually the chess federation of like the International Chess Federation that actually takes care of all the chess events and tournaments that happen all around the world. So this is the official chess clock. And this is actually two sides. One side is for black, one side is for white. Black actually gets the chance to place it on whichever side of the board that black prefers. And for suppose a blitz tournament, the timing would usually be 5 minutes. So there's like the button over here at the bottom, and once you press it, that's the on and off button. And at the back, there's actually different timings. According to a different type of chess tournament you are going to play, there will be different timings. So suppose you're playing a blitz tournament, then the timing would be 1, and then you place the tick button, and that would mean that each side now has an equal of 5 minutes. And once that the game starts, if suppose white plays a move, you click it, and that means that the timer is shifted to black side. This is how a usual chess game takes place, and once any of the sides' time gets over, that means that is the end of the game, and the side whose time got over has lost the game. This is a score sheet. As I have mentioned before, that once each side plays, that is when it's considered to be one move. So suppose white plays a move and then black plays a move, that is considered as one total move. Whoever is white writes its move on like the left side of the score sheet, and black's move is written on the right side of the score sheet. The timing here is usually written only if you're giving a very long game, because long games can range from at least 5 to 6 hours, and if you keep noting the number of time you took for like each move, then you can actually time yourselves. So in case you need to spend more time in the middle game than on the opening, then you can time yourself and see, okay, this is where I'm making the mistake, this is where I'm taking more time than I'm supposed to, or I'm taking less time than I'm supposed to. That's when the time factor comes in. One thing that you should be very careful about is that always write your score sheet, like the notation, correctly, because this is the only proof that you have that you played this particular match. So in some case, if you feel that they have given like the wrong result, then you can go and directly report it to like the authorities, so that you will be able to get the point that you deserve. One more thing is that in case you lost any match, right, this is the only way that you can go home and recheck where you made the mistake, where you can improve yourself, where you can find out, oh, this is where I'm supposed to practice more on, this is where I can improve, this is where I'm supposed to calculate more, this is where I'm supposed to give more time, less time. It really depends on the type of mistake you made. So this is the best way to get like your own learning experience and how you can make yourself better. One more thing is that always sign the score sheet in the end. So always in the score sheet, there's like a place where the white player signs, the black player signs, and the arbiter signs, so that the result has been approved by all of these 3 people. So never do your sign before the game ends or during the game, because if like the result is written wrong, then they can show that you agreed to it, and so you cannot get the point that you're supposed to get. Also, for the result, always write the right result. So there can only be three outcomes. That is 1-0, 0-1, or half-half. 1-0 is when white wins. So there will be 1 in white's block and 0 in black's block. 0-1 is when black wins. So there will be 0 in white's block and 1 in black's block. And half is when there is a draw. So it will be half and half. Also, write the names of you and your opponent correctly so that you can have a database about yourself and also for other players. And that is how you usually do a notation on a proper score sheet. Thank you. Stay home, stay safe.